Welcome to the Replenishing Life Project. 30 days to recover from burnout and reclaim your vitality. With your hosts, Morgan B. and Lucy Ann Chard. Okay, so hey everyone, welcome to the Replenishing Life Project. I'm Lucy Ann Chard and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Morgan B. Hey Morgan.
Hi.
And today we are thrilled to introduce our guest, acupuncturist and burnout coach, Caitlin Donovan. Caitlin is an expert in Chinese medicine, a burnout coach, and the host of Fried, the Burnout Podcast. All of her projects are ruled by one thing: end burnout culture as soon as possible. She truly believes that stress management is the true medicine of the future and is relentless in her goal to teach as many female entrepreneurs as possible to be more resilient, have more energy, and more fun. Well, yes to that, Caitlin. Welcome. It's so wonderful to see you. Thank you for being here with us.
And thank you so much for having me. I know that things can be hard to coordinate internationally, but we've done a beautiful job of finding time and creating space for one another. So I appreciate that from the host side.
Absolutely amazing. Well, it's so exciting to be with you in this space. We'd love to start by asking you to share your story with us about your experience of burnout.
So my burnout happened multiple times before I realized that it was burnout. And when I finally heard the word burnout for the first time used in the context of long-term chronic stress that breaks you down to a point that allows your body to break down, that interferes with your emotional regulation, that interferes with your nervous system functioning. When I read that the first time, I went, oh, okay. I didn't know that's what was happening. And then it took me through sort of an unwinding of the past 10 years of my life where I had burnt out a couple of times. And I didn't find the word burnout, and I almost didn't admit, I will say, from today's perspective, burnout, because I did a job that I loved. So as an acupuncturist, I followed my heart. You know, I have this whole crazy story about how I went from being in a pre-medicine curriculum at Boston University to doing an acupuncture master's degree in California. All these things had to come together. It was like magic. I made this, major decision and took this big risk. And then I found the love of my life while on vacation in Argentina and moved to Poland to be with him. I was the person who followed all of the spiritual principles. Follow your heart, go towards expansion, do the things that are going to feed you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I found myself really successful and really miserable, I was really confused too.
Wow. Yes, that's quite the opposite of what we normally hear from burnout. And for myself, I know that I had the experience of being in a job that I did not like and doing things that weren't in alignment with what I thought was, what I was supposed to be doing. And that's how it came to burnout. So that's amazing to hear that perspective of, following your heart and it's still leading to this place of burnout. And so from your perspective, what do you feel that, were there any sort of signs along the way that you might have missed? Or was this something of just a moment where you needed to pivot and change what you were doing or switch paths?
So for me, the number one sign that I tell people to look for, especially when I'm doing keynote speeches or I'm in a group of, kind of 200 people or 300 people doing a speech, when I'm in those rooms, the very key factor that I ask people to look for is resentment. because this is really the true beginning of burnout, I think.
Wow. Mm.
Because resentment is a sign to us that we are overgiving, and you can overgive no matter what job you choose to do. I do not believe the Instagram hype that if you find your passion, you're never going to feel like you're working again, because your passion also includes pieces that you don't like to do. And even within your passion, you still have to maintain internal boundaries that allow you space for self-care. And when you choose a caring profession, when you choose to be a coach, a therapist, a doctor, a nurse, an acupuncturist, a massage therapist, whatever it happens to be, when you choose a caring profession, you often choose it because you love it, and you often give too much.
Gosh, that's incredibly powerful. Oof. And as you said that, I felt that in my gut, because I can relate so strongly to that feeling. So thank you for saying that. That's incredibly powerful. Let's talk a little bit about something that I love that you say in your bio about stress management as the future, as the medicine for the future. And I'd love to hear more about your take on this and how you approach this.
So for me, when the World Health Organization decided to call burnout not a disease, but an occupational hazard as of June 2019, they started this whole system, whereas we're starting to look at burnout through a series of definitions that were created by a burnout researcher, Christina Maslach. And it's really, the definition is really broad and kind of doesn't mean much. There's 3 signs that need to be present, right? The first one is physical and emotional exhaustion. Like that can show up a million different ways in a million different people. The next one is cynicism and detachment. So negative self-talk, like welcome to life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
And then the third one is lack of feeling impactful, lack of feeling accomplished, and poor performance at work. Well, if you're not feeling impactful and you're not feeling accomplished and you have negative self-talk and you're exhausted, like, yeah, of course. So this is now, these 3 signs are said to be what burnout is. But we're not talking about what the causes are and why we get there, because really what the symptoms are not very important. Because if you say physical and emotional exhaustion, like in the world of Chinese medicine, that can mean to me constant migraines, IBS, Crohn's disease, infertility. It can mean a million different things. Like your body can do so many different things when it's exhausted, and it will be dependent on your previous health history. So if you had whiplash when you were 12, then you'll likely get a stiff neck when you're exhausted. You know, things like that. So it doesn't really, saying physical and emotional exhaustion is a symptom of burnout and that's how you find it, like that's all well and good, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's not very clearly defined, and it's not talking about how we got there in the first place. And how we got there in the first place is unresolved, chronic, unprocessed stressors that are often unprocessed because we don't even realize that they're there.
Yeah.
We're not ignoring them for the most part, I don't think. I really don't believe that we're taught to look at things as stressors and taught to end the cycle. So I don't blame people for being in this system.
Sure. Right.
So I feel like if we can take 2 steps back, not just recognize the symptoms of burnout, not just deal with stress when we already see it, but if we can take an extra step back beyond that and say, listen, as a world, as communities, we need to learn. Stress management needs to be a skill that is taught at the very basic levels, because the World Health Organization is now saying that within the next less than 30 years, more than 75% of chronic conditions are going to be caused primarily by stress.
Wow.
Then if stress management is not the medicine of the future, I don't know what is.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. That's, that is a very good point. So, okay. So then this stress where does the stress come from? Because, so I heard you speak on your podcast actually about society having certain levels of satisfaction built within them. And I feel like there's a connection and a relation to that and stress and sort of what society, what we feel is stressful or the stressors that are placed upon us in daily life. And yeah, can you speak to that and this levels of satisfaction and yes, the influence from society?
Can I go a little bit backwards from that before we go there? Because your initial question was, where's all this stress coming from?
Yes.
Right? That was the initial question. And the initial answer to that, I think, first and foremost, is unresolved trauma at every level. It's unresolved trauma in our grandparents that went down to our parents, that went down into us, right? Because most of the behaviors that lead to the ability to not notice stress and then react to it appropriately are coping mechanisms that we created in response to trauma.
Yes.
And or they are things that we learned to do and ways we learned to act by watching our parents who chose those coping mechanisms because of trauma.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, the most important conversation when it comes to stress management is trauma release on a societal level. Normalizing, because every single person has trauma. I don't care how wonderful your life was, something traumatized you. And what we don't realize is we always are thinking about the degree to post-traumatic stress disorder, right? We're thinking about, soldiers that were in minefields that watched their friends blow up. We're not thinking about the fact that, your grandmother told you that your knees were too fat every day. Every single day for your whole entire life. That's trauma too. Yeah. It doesn't do the same exact thing to your brain. No. But that long-term buildup of it actually does. Because the long-term unprocessed chronic stress brain and the PTSD brain are very, very, very similar. The limbic systems are overactive. The amygdala is overactive. The frontal cortex, especially the left side, has shrunken and is not functioning to its normal ability. So you do not have the actual skill or executive function to be able to look at your emotions from a distance and make sort of logical reactions to them. You are in emotion equals emotion equals emotion begets emotion. You're stuck in a cycle of emotions that are causing each other without any ability to be the observer.
Wow.
Right? So the society, yes, the expectations that we have and fulfilling certain roles, especially if you are outside of being the I'm a white privileged woman in the society that I live in, especially if you're outside of that norm. I'm heterosexual, I'm white, I'm of an average weight. I don't have any disfigurement or disablement, et cetera, et cetera. And those are all of my privileges. Even within those privileges, there are some things that sort of, that society wants out of you. But before we even get to dealing with that level, we have to talk about the fact that we're trying to meet those expectations from society because we don't feel worthy because we have trauma.
Gosh, that's huge. Yeah. Just taking a moment to digest that. So, Caitlin, how do we begin to navigate trauma release?
I'm not a trauma specialist. I am trauma informed on a very deep level, but I am not a trauma specialist and I am not a psychologist. So I don't want to go into that question really, really deeply. I have trained in ancient Tibetan practices of trauma release, but that is a Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine sort of world. And I don't think is appropriate to share without some sort of guidance being available for people to use that information. I don't think it's something that should be used sort of like willy-nilly. But I think the first part of it is we stop pretending that we don't have it. You know, the first step in every process is observation, is noticing. When I realized, you know, maybe I'll go this way. In my particular story, I grew up in a household with 2 parents. So that's supposed to be, you know, good. My father, until I was 6 years old, was a drug addict and an alcoholic. Not violent, not crazy emotional, very functional, had a job, did all the things he was supposed to do, you know, all of that, but was emotionally not there, obviously, because he was in another world most of the time. He went away for just 2 weeks for rehab, came back and has been clean ever since. I just found out 2 years ago that he was only gone for 2 weeks. I thought he had been gone for 6 months. Right. Wow. And because the focus of my family always, even though we didn't have a lot, was, and this is a tricky thing, this is something that messes people up a little bit. My family focused on gratefulness. My family focused on being happy for what we had, for not complaining, for saying, you know, it could be worse. Look at those people. You know, those people maybe have a Mercedes, but their wives are cheating on them and their children don't like them. And I'd rather have what we have, and you have to appreciate it. You have to appreciate it. You have to appreciate it. So I did appreciate it, so much so that I refused to believe that anything that happened during my childhood could have had a bad effect on me because other people have it worse. I was not in abject poverty. I did not have holes in my shoes. I always had clothes that fit me. I was clean. I had enough food to eat. I was never afraid we were going to lose our home. So I did not allow myself to even believe that trauma could have been part of my life. Wow. So we first need to stop the comparison. So I always warn people about using, you know, somebody else has it worse as a lift for your own life, because long term that perspective is harmful for both sides. Because first of all, you're deciding that the person that you're looking at has it worse than you, and you don't actually know how they feel about their circumstances. They could have a totally different view of their lives than you do. They could feel pretty lucky and pretty grateful, and you're telling them that they should feel bad because their lives are terrible, which is not a good energy to send to people. And the other thing you're saying is, I should only be grateful for what I have because that person has it worse, because it could be worse. Right? And I think that that's a terrible thing to do. But we all do it, and we do it to our children. Yeah. You know, I don't have children, but you hear mothers do this all the time to their kids, trying to instill a sense of gratefulness in them. But you instill a sense of gratefulness by being a grateful person, not by pointing out why you think the rest of the world is crap.
Yeah. It's almost, you know, hearing you say this, it's almost like gratitude. And this is something that I've experienced, that the practice of gratitude is sometimes also a form of spiritual bypassing, in not giving ourselves permission to be in the yuck, to feel the feels that aren't so pretty. Be grateful for everything can actually be a numbing practice.
Thank you for saying that. I write about this. I have a book coming out next year. It's being edited at the moment. And I write about this in the book, because I think this is so dangerous. Do use gratefulness and gratitude as spiritual bypassing. We do say, and I did it for so long myself, and I justified it. You know, and especially because when I was finally going through those things, I had an even better life than I had as a child. I had the money that I needed. I had the job that I always wanted. I had a beautiful husband. I had a place to live. I had a 3-month waiting list at my acupuncture practice. It was all I was on TV and in magazines. Like, it was very schmancy. Yeah. But I was miserable, and I was breaking apart inside, and I wouldn't let myself break apart because I didn't think I deserved it. I didn't think I should be allowed to break down because my life is good.
Oh, wow. I feel that so much, that there's like an underlying resentment to, you know, having to be grateful for something when it's like, wait, I didn't even feel or allow myself to feel that emotion, what was going on in the first place. You know, it was just skipping to, nope, just got to be grateful and continue on and forge ahead. And oh my gosh, yeah. So, so for our listeners that are currently experiencing burnout or feel that they have burned out in certain areas of their life, what would you say is a good first step to take to begin that healing process and that journey?
The first step in my process always is observation. Always. Because you cannot change things that you do not see or accept. So first we need to figure out, when you say you're burnt out, what do you really mean? What are you actually saying? Is your body falling apart? Are you angry all the time? Are you feeling resentful? Like, what does it actually mean for you? We need to pull this apart in a million pieces so that we can figure out what puzzle pieces we are working with. And the next step for me is always something that I call life pruning. Can I swear?
Yeah, go for it. Yes, please.
So in my practice, life pruning is cutting away all of the bullshit. So when you have a tree in your backyard that needs to be pruned in order for it to grow upwardly or grow in the direction that you want it to grow, so that you can sort of control it and allow it to not lose energy feeding leaves and branches that it doesn't need to feed, you cut away all the bullshit, right? You need to do this in your life because we use the bullshit as noise. We use it as noise to distract us. We use it as noise to drown out our inner voices. Right? So you have to cut out all the things that are unnecessary. And that takes that first observation step. Once we do that observation, we look through and I say, well, you don't actually need to do that. You can stop picking out your 10-year-old's clothes. She's 10. You know, we can cross this off your list. We can cross this off your list. We can cross this off your list. And we just cross things off until we are down to what you need to do in order to not lose your job or your business. Really, you know, decent grooming habits, which when you're burnt out, usually, you know, we call this a, you know, pits, tits, and bits shower.
Yeah.
Right. You're going through these things so quickly because you don't feel like you deserve to have the time to really, really care for yourself, even if something as simple as a shower. So we cut away all the nonsense, cross off all the things that you don't need to be doing, start doing some really good showers and good hair scrubbings, like drop this dry shampoo for a couple of weeks. And then we start to see what boils to the surface once there's not so much noise.
It reminds me of something that I read on your blog that I found so inspiring. And I know that you talk about this in your work. You talk about allowing space for grace. And I just, even just saying that, I get tingles. Would you like to share with us more about that as a practice?
I would like to write an entire book on that.
Yeah, it's there waiting to be written.
This is something that every single time I say it, I feel it in my whole body. Like you said that you felt tingles, so did I. My whole body goes into, yes, please, more of that. Because when you are stuck in that sort of the negative self-talk, the cynicism and detachment part of burnout, it can be really, really hard to grant yourself the space to be human, especially when you are someone who follows spiritual practices and sort of likes to believe that you're a little bit better than other people at this stuff. I mean, I am right there. That is not a judgment. That is a statement of where I have been in the past and where I am sure I will find myself in the future as soon as I need a slap up the head and say, you know, relax, girlfriend. we're so harsh on ourselves that if we do not create space for grace, if we do not allow ourselves to be observant without harsh judgment, we do not make progress. If we cannot forgive ourselves, and this can get really ugly. We have to, space for grace is also space to be comfortable with discomfort. This is the same thing to me, because if you're not okay being uncomfortable, you're never going to do this work. It's not comfortable work. You can't blame anybody anymore. You have got to take your own stuff on and be really honest about it. And it's scary. So if you don't create space for that, you'll beat yourself down before you get to where you need to go. Yeah.
Wow.
Do we need a collective deep breath?
Yeah.
Taking a deep breath. Some truth there. Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful. Love it.
Wow. Hearing that, it's wow. It brings up a lot of guilt and shame as well around that, like not giving time for that space or that grace to come in. And wow, it's that's a good one. Oh my gosh.
I was actually thinking about it a little bit this morning, because I'm not getting into this exact topic today, but my whole way of getting out of burnout is called the knot. And I did a talk on it earlier this week on Tuesday. And I was talking about during that day about the fact that when we don't allow ourselves this space for grace, when we don't allow ourselves this space for discomfort, one of the things that happens is we don't allow ourselves space to heal our relationships. And what we're telling people is that we don't trust them to be present with us in our ugliness, in our scary bits. And I think that for me, sort of healing relationships is stage 2 of burnout recovery. We go through the life pruning, we find energy leaks first, then we plug energy leaks, we rebuild energy. That's the whole first stage, right? And once someone has done that, then we take that energy into your life, not just in your body, and in your health, but into your life. And when we take it into your life, we start to heal your relationships. And I was thinking about someone in my life who had avoided having a difficult conversation with me for a long time. And I've done that to other people as well, not had the conversation that I needed to have with them because I was afraid to have it. And what I realized when she did that to me was that she didn't trust me enough to say, you know what, this really hurt me. She didn't trust me with herself. She didn't trust me with myself. She didn't trust me with our relationship. She didn't give me a chance to heal some of the resentment that might have come up. She didn't even give me the opportunity.
Wow.
So when you don't give yourself space for grace, you're not even granting yourself the opportunity to fix the things that went wrong, to face the difficult spaces. Right? She didn't give me a chance. But when you don't have space for grace, you don't give yourself a chance either. And if you don't give yourself a chance, there's nothing anybody can do.
Hearing you speak about healing relationships, it reminds me, and I think it's aligned to this, because on your blog you wrote such an incredible article that really resonated with me, and you called it The Audacity of Calling Yourself a Healer. Oh, it's a great article, and it's brilliant. And I love what you said here. You said, in order for the healing forces to be activated in another, we must first activate it in ourselves. And that's juicy.
So that is something that has come through my life multiple times. You know, when you're on a path of becoming a healer, it tends to sort of take on a life of its own. And I, read self-help books for dinner. I read 60 or 70 books a year, and I have since I was a child. So this is, I've read all the books. And so I've come across this idea multiple times of, the healer is a channel, the healer needs to empty themselves, the healer is a vessel, the healer is this, the healer is that. And it wasn't until I read research in a book by Jill Blakeway, who's also an acupuncturist in New York City. She wrote a book titled Energy Medicine. And it's a perfect blend of practicality, spirituality, and actual science. The real science behind why all this stuff works. And she participated in the research herself and saw other research that shows that when someone who is healing, so we'll call them a healer, which is why I was writing this article. It was after I read this book. Mm-hmm. When you are going into a healing space, what happens is there happens to be a coherence between the waves of your brain and the waves of your heart. They start to communicate with each other at such a level that's like 0.4 seconds even before your intuition. We are like way ahead here. So we create this space in ourselves where there's so much coherence, where there's so much balance within us, that automatically the person that we're sharing the room with, or not even in the room, and this is why distance Reiki and things like that can work, the person that we're working with enters into that space too without even trying. What?
Amazing.
This is, can we just what energetically and electrically is a better word. Electrically, we are matching with one another when there is a healing going on.
Yeah.
And that's happening before either of us know. And it happens with our animals. It happens with our family members. But what people don't realize, and something that I think is extremely important, is the bad stuff affects us like that too. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of spiritual talk about how you create your own world and everything's based on you. Like, sorry, no, it's not. I couldn't handle life in Poland. The general vibe is of massive trauma, anger, resentment, difficulty, and I'm not blaming them for it. They have been through it all. And I can't live in that. Mm-mm. I can't live in that soup. It does not feel okay to me. And so while, yes, we create our worlds to a certain degree, what we have to realize is we're all co-creating it at the same time. So no, not everything happens to you because you made it happen. No, you didn't deserve to be attacked or hurt or have that accident. No. Sometimes you were just in the wrong energy that was made up of other people's nonsense and by accident.
Yeah.
This is like important to me.
It is to me too, and it's so liberating to speak about it. I think that's why it's so important that we have these conversations, and that, we serve this truth, because it's a bypassing, and it's a numbing thing, and it's blocking, isn't it, by not actually speaking about it in this way. And I think some of the more, as you were saying, more new age spiritual concepts are actually tremendously damaging.
I agree. I agree. I think that the end goal of them and is valid. And I think that when someone is a true practitioner, that the things that they're saying are true. And I believe in people's ability to get to that stage. I just don't necessarily believe in people's ability to get to their stage when they are living full-time in normal, like average, typical 2019 developed world human life.
Yeah.
If you want to take off every other year and do a full year sabbatical in an ashram, yeah, probably you can maintain that. But that's not the reality for most of us. We have 20 minutes in the morning, maybe if we're lucky, to meditate and say some chants. We maybe light a candle throughout the day. Like I meditated before we got on this talk, and then we did another meditation together before we started. However, that's what, 4 minutes? We still have 300 people that we're going to come into some sort of contact with today just by going to the grocery store. Like I'm sorry, I'm not powerful enough to transform 300 people's energy in the grocery store. You know?
Yeah, right.
And so does it come down to energy management? And like I'm just feeling more of knowing where my energy field is and what's in it, and focusing on that as a starting point. Yes. Like
yes,
the energy.
yes, 1,000% yes. And that is what I said, we're not going into that today because that's an hour and a half long talk all on its own, the whole theory. But that is the main premise of all the work that I do is energy management, which is why we do pruning first. Right? Yes. We do observation, we do pruning. We look for all the places that energy is leaking in your life. We plug those leaks, and then we work on energy cultivation. Only then, once we get to that point. And the energy management and stress management to me are go super hand in hand. Because like what you said is symptomatic almost of the spiritual world, right? Like what's in my bubble and what's not. Everything's in your damn bubble. Like, sorry, you can create this aura protection if you want to, but energy goes 1,000 different directions. It's not like it's goes into your heart and comes out and that's it. No, it's going all over the place all the time, and you can't always be protected from other people's stuff, right? In that same book, Jill Blakeway talks about another experiment where they said what's the proper word? They can measure the heart waves outside of the body. I can't remember the right word for it, but they can measure them up to 8 to 10 feet outside of the body. Wow. So that means, and that's only what they've measured. We don't know if it goes further than that, right? So that means that unless you keep yourself at a 10-foot radius to all people at all times, you're going to be in somebody else's shit.
Yeah. Wear your hula hoop into the grocery store, nobody come anywhere near me.
Can you imagine a 3-meter hula hoop all the time?
That's brilliant. It's a good visual. I want to talk for a second about your amazing podcast. It's a huge inspiration, and listening to the episodes and the work that you're creating in the world, Caitlin, I'm amazed just how many people, women, are coming out of the woodwork, if you like, with stories of burnout. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective, in what way is burnout different for female entrepreneurs?
For me, first of all, people are coming out of the woodwork, which is amazing. I put up one request, and I think within 48 hours, I had 35 people scheduled to interview. So I did 35 interviews over the course of 5 weeks.
Gosh.
Thankfully, here's me being grateful for my Achilles tendon rupturing. Thankfully, my Achilles tendon had ruptured and I was in bed. So I had all the time in the world to do these interviews. And I will talk about that just for a quick second, because I did share during the process how I had gotten depressed and I had a lot of difficulty not being able to take care of myself and being dependent and all of this stuff. And people kept saying, yeah, but at least you still have your foot. And I was like, can you just let me?
Yeah.
Just let me have this right now. This is really shitty enough. I don't need to lose my foot. This sucks. Please let me have it be sucky for a minute before we silver lining everything. Okay? I don't want the foil. Take it away.
Yeah.
You know?
Damn it. Mm-hmm.
Damn it. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, in women and in entrepreneurs, I think there's like, I'll do entrepreneurs first, male or female, really, because that this is important. As an entrepreneur, you are responsible not only for the work that you do, but the space that you do it in. And burnout is always on some level a combination of internal and external factors. So the internal factors, your unresolved trauma, the coping mechanisms that you created in order to survive, your level of self-worth, the motivation by which you drive for success. You know, what are you aiming to get out of it? Is it actually in alignment with what you need? Right? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whose goals are you trying to fulfill? What template are you functioning on? Your families, your husband's families, whatever it happens to be. So all of these things go into it no matter who you are. But when you're working in a corporation or a hospital or whatever, the burnout is happening because you lack autonomy, because someone else is creating your schedule, because you don't have a big enough influence on what's happening around you, because you have fluorescent lights and they really suck, because you can't control the people that you work with, because you have somebody that's toxic in the lunchroom and every time you walk in there, you feel it. And But as an entrepreneur, whether you are female or male, all of those things are on you. And if you're working with a client that you don't like, that's because you didn't listen to your boundary. That's not anybody else's fault. It's because you were afraid of not having enough money, or you didn't listen to your boundary, or you, whatever it happens to be, but that's your choice. So burnout for entrepreneurs, I think, is a much more difficult game because it's like 90% internal, 10% external. Maybe, you know, your home environment isn't supportful enough or something like that, supportive enough or something like that. But generally, almost everything is riding on you. So that's a major, major, major thing that people are not talking about when it comes to entrepreneurial burnout. There's a lot of research into doctor burnout and nurse burnout, and it's too much caring, and it's, you know, like too much work, and there's too much paperwork to do, and they can't do the work that they need to do. And I totally get it, and they're right, and they need help. Absolutely. However, there are systems that can be put into place that will make things easier for them. And those systems have to be put into place by administrators. And they don't have control over whether or not administrators make those decisions. When you are the administrator, the therapist, the online social media organizer, you've got to do all those things yourself. If your desk is in a room that makes you feel like shit, like, that's up to you to change. No one's going to do that for you. You have to make those decisions. So this is the part of entrepreneurship that I think really needs to be addressed specifically. And it's why my book is written particularly for entrepreneurs.
Brilliant.
As women, in the book, High Octane Women, I can't remember her last name right now. Sherry Bird Carter. She describes this when somebody creates their own business as a male, it's automatically assumed and accepted by both him and his wife and society at large that his wife is going to pick up the extra stuff at home so that he has the freedom to work on his business. And it's a subconscious, automatic, and I'm not saying somebody's out there being like, I didn't do that for my husband. Yeah, well, you know what? Okay, fine. But for the large majority of people, that is just the natural way that it happens, because in the large majority of homes, it is still the house care and the child care and the that is falling on the woman. And because we're taking it, and because it's expected, and because the systems haven't changed yet, and there's a million, we can talk about why, and we can go into patriarchy and what. That's not the point, really. The point is that's the way it happens. And when women start a business, nobody's stepping in to say, I'll do extra laundry so that you have time to do this interview today.
Yeah, it's true.
If you don't hire a housekeeper, if you don't delegate that stuff, if you don't have a husband that will step up and do it. My husband works full time. And American style full time, which means he gets to the office at like 7:45 and doesn't get home until 6:30 at night.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna come home and do dishes? God, no. Like I wouldn't want to in his position either.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a housekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
She comes only once every other week at the moment. But let me tell you, she's going to be here in like a half hour. And I'm like, thank God.
Yeah.
Because I do not have the time to scrub a toilet today. I have 2 podcast episodes to finish before my best friend gets into town tomorrow. Like it's going to take me 5 hours. If I cleaned for 4, which is how long it takes me to clean my apartment, I would not be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think being a woman and being an entrepreneur, we get sort of a double whammy of those things that are hard to wiggle out of because of, like you mentioned in the beginning, Morgan, societal expectations, the things society expects of us, the way things have always been done, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And then, wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, I was just thinking about how when I transitioned into entrepreneurship, how it was liberating to be able to have all these choices, that I got to make the choices and nobody was making the choices for me. This is great. I can have my own space and I can do my own thing. And then I think I ran into this problem of boundary setting. And I guess that goes back to energy management about, not putting my energy or my boundaries in place so that I don't go and work, and pile everything into one day and then get exhausted. Like there's that, and then I'm single, so I don't have the partner that's contributing to, financially. And there's many, wow. Yeah.
So basically you're Superwoman.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's very eye-opening to go from, corporate and into transitioning into entrepreneurship. It's just a whole different world here.
Well, and a lot of times people don't realize when they're leaving the corporate world how much support they have within the corporate world. This is something that my husband said, that he went to work for a startup at some point, maybe 10 years ago or so. I don't remember exactly, and he only lasted 6 months. Mm-hmm. He said, Katie, they gave me a computer that wasn't like ready. Like I had to set it up myself. I was like, welcome to life, kid.
That makes me laugh.
Yeah. Because we always do all of those things ourselves as entrepreneurs. Yeah. It's never done for us, that kind of stuff. I mean, eventually, maybe you hire people and some of that stuff is done, but And when he had that experience, his respect for me as an entrepreneur went up majorly, because it taught him how many things are being done for him at his corporate office on a regular basis, because he just calls somebody and says, hey, he calls the lawyer and says, hey, I need this contract handed to me. Can you have it done by the end of the day? And she gives it to him 25 minutes later. I'm like, I'm not a lawyer and I have to write that damn contract myself. Or I have to go pay somebody to do it, which means that I have to justify that cost somewhere and make sure I'm earning enough to balance that out. And once you get to a certain level, those choices are easy. Like I paid a lawyer now, I'm not going to worry about it. But when you're starting, you can't pay a lawyer for every time you need a piece of paper. You do a lot of legal Googling.
Exactly.
And you write a lot of really crappy contracts.
Yeah. And I think the key of what you're saying is that, as female entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general, we just do it, we do it. Mm-hmm. And it really, it's thank you for saying that, because it reminds me of what you were talking about earlier about overgiving, and also being aware of your own energy and just how much you yourself are willing to take on, and it's down to us. It is our responsibility to recognize if you're in a place of saying, well, I'm just going to do everything myself and more and more and more and more, and then working yourself to the bone as an entrepreneur, and you're of no service to anyone if you're depleted.
Yeah, and the major sign for that is resentment. As soon as you're annoyed that you got a client email, as soon as somebody calls you to book or asks you a question and you're like, really? I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
As soon as someone asks you to do a speaking event that you know you're not going to get paid for, and instead of just saying, actually, no, I'm not doing unpaid speaking events at the moment, you get all riled up about it.
Love it.
Right?
Yeah.
As soon as you feel those things, those are all the signs that you are giving too much. Yes, you want to be of value, and yes, you want to be of service, and yes, you want to help people. I understand all of those things, but there have to be cutoff marks, and they should be before you feel resentful.
Love it. Strong. Love it. Yes, truth. So yes. So Caitlin, tell us about some of the support and the resources that are available for people.
This to me really depends on exactly who someone is. I'm a big fan of niching down and working with people that totally understand you. So, which is why I'm so focused on female entrepreneurs, especially those in the caring professions, because that's what I know, that's who I am, that's who I serve, and that makes it easy for me. It's just really on point. But to me, there's not I'm so used to swearing, I almost stopped myself, but there's not a shit ton of resources at the moment, to be perfectly honest. There are a couple of books. One of them is called The Burnout Cycle, and it's by the Nagoski sisters. It does give a really great explanation of what the stress cycle is in the body and how to stop it and how to not allow it to continue, and kind of spill over into your life. I think that's really important. My podcast, I really feel like, is an amazing resource. Yeah. And the reason that I started it is because I want everyone to be able to hear at least one episode that reminds them of themselves enough to allow them to create space for grace and choose to heal. And I keep hearing feedback that people say, oh my God, I listened to this podcast and I was like, oh my God, that's me. Yeah. And if you can do it, then I can do it. I can make that choice too. And the more we're talking about it and the more people are sharing the ugly bits of what they went through. I mean, if you listen to my podcast, you're going to hear people talking about wanting to drive off the road, people talking about being in fetal position on the bathroom floor, bawling, crying. You know, we are not shy. Yeah. The people, I have been really lucky with my guests to find people that are not afraid to share their real stories. And it is really hitting a nerve. And I think that that's a really amazing space. And I think the other place, honestly, the best conversations happen on my personal Instagram page. Beautiful. That's where, because I love connecting with other burnout coaches. So I'm friends with all of them. And I'm like, share your knowledge, be in this space. Let's talk about this, because I don't have all the answers. I know about the stuff that I know about, but there's a million other things out there and I can't know all of it. So I invite a lot of people into that space to share their knowledge too. So I feel like that's a good place to get some information. Amazing. But as far as I want to start a membership community, because I feel like that's what really needs to happen. There needs to be a space to really dig into this. And I haven't found one yet. Yeah. So I might make one.
Yeah. Well, we'll put all of your details and links to your website and your podcast, of course, and your social media links in the show notes so that people can connect with you and start just organically forming this community. So amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
And one last question for you. So we've asked all of our guests to answer this question. If you could send a supportive, loving message to your younger self from, say, 20 or so years ago, what would you say?
You have nothing to prove. You're good enough today.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt that. So Caitlin, just a huge thank you for being here with us and just for sharing your wisdom and your insights with us and making us laugh and the truth and the rawness. And it's just been the most fabulous conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me, both of you. It was such an easy, good conversation. And I'm so glad to always have it. The more we have it, the easier it becomes for everyone. And that's the whole point.
Thank you.